And finally, very much last but no means least, we can speak to Marcin Budkowski, Executive Director of Alpine F1 team, who joins us to discuss the sporting objectives for 2021. Marcin, a different year ahead than maybe what had been planned by all teams this time last year. So what does that actually mean for the car that you have for this season?
Well, I think it's been, as we were saying earlier, it's a challenging winter we had. It's a completely different atmosphere in Enstone and in Viry than it is in normal winter. It's the busiest period of the year, and still a lot less employees than normal. It doesn't mean they're not working as hard. They're all working from home. But we're going into the season, determined to continue on the positive momentum we had last year, carried into 2021, and obviously improve our competitiveness and fight for more podiums.
Adam Cooper from motorsport.com says, what changes have you had to make to meet the 2021 budget cap, or did it land at just the right level? And what will you have to do as the cap decreases in the future?
So it's a game of trade-offs. The budget cap is really getting the resources in the right place for the car competitiveness. I mean, we cut on the internet budget to we've put everything in the car today. Clearly, no. But jokes aside, we're lucky that the changes we have to make for this year are actually quite small, but we will be caught by the cap in the next years. So it's about really prioritizing, where the performance comes from. It's all about getting the car to go quicker, but also efficiency. We're working a lot on the efficiency of the team, working better, working smarter with the resources we have. Luckily, we've never been the best funded team. We've always been known as an efficient team, and we are probably in a better position than the top teams for the cost cap. So we obviously want to capitalize on this in the future.
Okay, keep your questions coming in both English and in French for Marcin. Dieter Renken Racing Lines says there has been an upheaval with the switch to Alpine. Daniel Ricciardo and Cyril out, Fernando and Davide in, plus other moves. Budget cap coming in. So how competitive and settled do you believe that this team is?
Dieter, welcome back. It's always good questions. Look, there's been a number of changes. Obviously, it's not my place to comment the departure of Cyril. We have a new structure. We're lucky that with the Alpine project, we're really part of the group strategy now, the Renault group strategy, and that's it's a stability going forward that is great for the team. It's also something we want to build on for the future. So, irrespective of the, yes, there's been an upheaval, yes, it's new colours, it's a new dynamic, it's a new energy in the project, and we're looking forward to it.
We have Scott Mitchell says, just in case it was missed, that's from Scott from the race, are you and Davide effectively splitting the responsibilities of a team principal between you, and what are the perceived benefits of forgoing the traditional structure with a dedicated team principal?
Well, we went for a slightly different structure than the conventional, if you want, team structure. But at the end of the day, the roles and the responsibilities are clear. It's just we're calling them, a little bit differently. I mean, we're a French team. At the end, we had to put a bit of French touch in the organizational structure as well.
Joe Sayward asks, have the COVID travel restrictions between France and UK created problems building the new car?
They have a little bit. I mean, the usual logistics issue that everybody's been experiencing at the border, if you want, so that delays the various parts and whether the engines or parts going between Viry and Enstone. The biggest challenge has been really preparing for the fire up and for the shakedown we're doing tomorrow, because our engineers from Viry, engineers and technicians, had to quarantine to be able to do the shakedown tomorrow. But as usual, we are getting around these restrictions, and it won't prevent us from running the car tomorrow.
Ian Parks, GP Fans Global, says, what are the difficulties the team has found so far in managing two different car programmes, 21 and 22, whilst also working within the budget cap? And when does it expect to be 100% focused on the 22 car?
It's a long question. We used to juggle with several car programs, usually two car programs. There's the difference this year is the 22 changes are nothing less of a revolution. I mean, I'm going to celebrate my 20 years in a sport in April, and I've never seen such a big upheaval of regulation. So it's a completely new ballgame, and therefore it puts even more emphasis on starting early and getting the initial concept right. So it's this year, it makes it even more difficult, if you want, because we want to develop this car. We want to go into the championship and fight for good positions and fight for a good championship position. At the same time, transitioning early is important. For us, as I said, the cost cap is a very small impact at the moment. So actually that didn't come in play, but it will come in play for the next seasons.
And last year, I understand there was the 20, 21 and 22 car all being developed or refined, as it were, for this year. What were the problems with that in terms of the number of people that were allowed in the building and to be working on each individual project?
I mean, yes, it's challenging to work on several car programs. We had at some point 3 car programs. We elected, as a team, to invest in this new regulatory period, if you want, which was supposed to start this year, and it was delayed by 1 year because of the pandemic. So at some point we had 3 car programs, and that's not easy for organization, especially because we're not as resourced as the biggest teams. COVID hit. I think it was the right decision to delay these regulations, even if we were quite keen on having them from this year, because they're an opportunity for us. It's a bit of a reset. Now we've accepted it because it was the right thing to do for the sport, and it was a reasonable thing to do. We carried over part of last year's car, and that made it a little bit easier if you want to have these programs running in parallel. But still, as I said, the 22 car is so different, and also we work in a completely new engine architecture. That means that there's a lot of efforts that have to go in this car early on.
So if this car is an evolution of last year's car, what are the changes that have been made?
Well, the basis is the same. If you want, the main structural elements are the same, but as we were talking during the launch earlier, the FIA has made changes to the aerodynamic regulations, quite extensive. We lost quite a bit of performance, all the teams have. So we've been racing against time over the winter to recover as much as possible of this performance. So a lot of changes at the rear of the car, and this is where we focused our attention, because that's where the regulations have impacted it. But overall, you work on everything you can redevelop, because at the end of the day, there's small gains of performance to be made everywhere, and it's so competitive, the field at the moment, that you can't neglect any part of the car.
Okay, John Noble from motorsport.com says, where has Renault spent its development tokens this year, and has the engine freeze call made any impact on the original engine program plan for 21-22?
So we've spent our tokens at the rear of the car, as I said, because this is the area we focused on. In terms of engine, yes, we've delayed the new engine architecture to 22 as well, to go with the new car. So this year's engine is an evolution of last year's engine.
Ishihara in F1 Sokoho from Japan says, Daniel Kvyat joined the Alpine F1 team as a reserve driver. Is there any possibility that he will participate in Bahrain testing, and has he already been on the simulator?
So no, he hasn't. Obviously, it's been announced today because it's been finalized very recently. Daniel is, it's important to have an experienced reserve driver when you go into a season with the threat of COVID being there. We've seen a few teams had to replace their drivers at the very last minute, so experience counts in this situation. So we will endeavor to give Daniel the best possible start, if you want, being accustomed to the team, to his teams of engineers, and obviously working in a simulator that will be a must. Whether he will run the car at some point in the season, I don't know that yet, but that's not the plan to run him in Bahrain.
Chris Medland from Racer says, I'm assuming it's down to a combination of COVID restrictions and his accident, but with Fernando unable to be part of the launch today, even remotely, how disruptive has the situation been in terms of the team's preparations for him with the season ahead?
Well, we're hoping to have Fernando obviously here today with us, although he was here indirectly waving from Switzerland. But no, honestly, it's really about giving him the best chances of fully recovering for the beginning of the season. So it's more important, I know our comms people probably would disagree, but it's more important to have him completely fit in time for the test in Bahrain than having him here today for the launch, or having him actually driving the car tomorrow for the shakedown. On top of that, when you have restrictions, when someone is recovering from an accident and you have restrictions of travel and quarantines, etc., it's not the best situation. So, let's give Fernando 100% time for recovery and have him fit for Bahrain testing.
So we've touched upon this with COVID, but we're bringing in the B word, Dieter Renken Racing Lines. How much has Brexit affected logistics given 2 bases across UK and France?
Well, it's complicated to deal. It does create delays, not only because of our 2 bases. We have suppliers, as most teams, who are based in Germany, in France, in Italy. We just have to take a little bit more margin, if you want, on the parts that are critical to run the car than normal. Normally, they would just go through the border like this, and sometimes they get stuck for a few days. F1 teams, we tend to leave everything at the last minute, and now we just have to take a little bit more margin. It's not something we used to do, because we push everything to the limit. But we have to cope with it, because otherwise we are at risk of missing some important elements.
We heard from Esteban earlier saying how excited he was about getting in the car tomorrow. You touched upon the fact that this is going to be your 20th anniversary within the sport when it gets to April. But how excited are you about the car tomorrow and this Alpine project?
It's always a special moment. There's a few moments like this that are milestones, if you want, in the life of a team, of the cycle, if you want, of Formula 1 seasons. We had the fire up a few weeks ago at a factory, and again, it's something like, I tend to think it's alive. When the first time you hear the engine in a car, just that car project, if you want, there was drawings, there was parts, there was purchase orders, there was all immaterial. The result of the work of hundreds of people who have spent their days, their evenings, their weekends working on this, and suddenly it comes to life. And tomorrow is the next big milestone. That if that car actually driving out of the garage, so obviously I'll be there to watch Esteban drive it out of the garage, and it's always this combination of excitement of seeing this new beast, if you want, finally to put together and going in the track, but also anxiety. Is it going to brake on the first lap? Is it going to be quick? Is the driver going to be happy? The driver comes back and he's done a lap, and you think, what is he going to say? What is he going to say about it? And hopefully it's not wet tomorrow in Silverstone, and we do have a good feedback.
Carlos Miquel says Honda has a new engine. Ferrari promise a big evolution. Are you worried with the delay of the new Renault engine until 2022? Will it be enough for 21 with the evolution of a 2020 engine?
Well, that's what we chose to do in terms of balancing our resources, and obviously in tackling the COVID situation. We had a strong power unit last year, and we have made some changes to it. There's an evolution compared to last year. We have some more power, we have some more performance coming from the engine. It's not a new one. It's going to give us reliability, hopefully. It's going to give us a better starting point if you want going into the season. It's a long season. There's only a few engines that can be used, three elements of the engine and 2 for some of them. So, it gives a solid base, if you want, while we're focusing our efforts in really making a big step for 22.
We touched upon team principles, but how will your role differ from Davide's role day to day?
In today's Formula 1 world, with the complexity of a Formula 1 team, especially one that does chassis and engines, we have a base in the UK, we have a base in France. There's 23 races, potentially 25 in the future. COVID restrictions means potential quarantines and etc. Honestly, in these conditions, managing a team and going to all races is very, very difficult. So for me, it's personally great to have Davide on board, apart from obviously all the skills he brings from his other motorsport experiences. But it means I won't have to go to all the races. It means I will probably I'll do the majority of them. I'll probably start skipping a few in the second part of the season. And we have someone in Davide who's got a lot of trackside experience, a lot of soft skills acquired as a team manager in other categories. He knows how to manage drivers. He knows how to motivate them. He knows how to organize a garage. So it's going to be a great contribution to have him there, and we can share the role and really make sure that we don't leave anything, if you want, without the attention it requires.
Scott Mitchell from The Race says, how curious have you been to tap into Davide's MotoGP experience, and where do you see the benefits for the team and also maybe the biggest learning curve for him?
Well, I think it's going to be a learning curve for Davide. I think the complexity of Formula 1 is huge compared to MotoGP. But with the few exchanges I had with him so far, he looks like first of all, very nice chap and someone who knows the task ahead of him. But as I said earlier, he brings some soft skills, and I think it's going to be a great contribution.
How much does the limited testing this season put a pressure on what you achieve in every minute of every test session, even on a filming day? What can you learn?
Oh, lots of pressure first to actually make the most of every testing day, testing hour, testing minute almost that we have. It's only a 3-day test in Bahrain, so it's a day and a half per driver. It's half what we would get in the normal season. It's quite a lot less than we would have had a few years ago. So yes, we're starting from a common base to last year's car, whether that's chassis or engine, but still we need to make the most out of the track time. Also, as I was alluding to earlier in the launch, there's some areas that have been changed that don't always corroborate, between the different tools, and we're going to do a lot of experiments at the track to get the most performance out of the car at the testing, and then probably in the first races as well. So track time is going to be key.
We might not have the big shift in development this year that had been talked to. Now it's going to 22, but there will be some changes to race weekends. Talking of sprint races, shortened weekends. What's your feeling about the overall direction of Formula One just now?
I think it's great. We mentioned 22. I think it's going to be a revolution. It's going to be a new Formula One, new cars, new approach to it. That's great. But even this year, the changes are smaller. The Friday sessions being shorter. It looks like not much of a change, but it's going to change the way the amount of information we get on tires, the amount of effort we can put in setup. We're going to go less prepared into the race. Now, Formula One teams hate that. We want to be perfect. We want to have everything covered. But as a result, it's probably going to make racing a bit less predictable, which is good for the fans. Sprint races, or whatever they're going to be called, super qualifying. It's excitement over 3 days, really. We're going to qualify on a Friday, we're going to race on Saturday and race again on Sunday. Now, again, we're going to go a lot less prepared into qualifying. But for the fans, whether at the circuit or at home, it's 3 days of excitement. And, teams sometimes look at it as, we're so obsessed about competing with each other. We're so obsessed about improving our competitiveness and our performance. But at the end of the day, we need to put a good show. And I think that's going to help putting a good show for the fans. So, let's try new formats. And, it's a great opportunity to see if that's something we want to carry over in the next seasons.
Great. So we've got another question here. Mehmet Kanyambagili from Motorsport Turkey says you were very successful with Ferrari in your early days as a supervisor. You're now in charge at Alpine. Can you repeat this success?
Well, different era. I was extremely lucky in my career. I actually started at Prost Grand Prix finally with Alain Prost, who's now a special advisor to the team. So but yeah, I was extremely lucky to be part of an era with. At Ferrari under Jean Todt, with Ross Brawn, with Rory Byrne, with Michael Schumacher, with all these great names, where some of them are still key names in the sport. Mattia Binotto was there, James Allison, they all teammates from this period. But it was a completely different role at the time. I was an engineer, I was contributing to the development of the car. Now I'm much more in a management position and contributing to the performance of the organization rather than the performance of the car itself. But certainly being part of such a successful organization, one that was dominating the sport at the time, is something that you remember, and you remember some of the things that we're doing right, and certainly that's something I take inspiration now in my management role to try to build a team as strong as the one we had at the time.
Martin, thank you very much. That concludes the English-speaking section. I'll hand you over to my French-speaking colleague.
Thank you.